What's a secret that could tear your entire family apart? Story 1. A couple of years ago, my family and I met up with my parents, grandma, siblings, and their families at a big beach house in North Myrtle Beach for a family vacation. At the time, I had gotten really into exploring my ancestry and was doing all kinds of research, including DNA kits and similar services. These ancestry services link you to people who share common ancestry with you, things like so-and-so is your fourth cousin, and so on. One evening, I was sharing some fun and harmless findings with my dad, oldest brother, and grandma out on the deck. At some point, I mentioned that I thought it was odd that three of my cousins, born to my dad's older brother, were popping up as second or third cousins on the service. The middle daughter in that group had done the same ancestry test as me, so her profile was automatically linked to mine. I said, "Why does H show up as a second or third cousin if she's supposed to be my first cousin? Uncle B's daughters should all be my first cousins." Without a word, my grandma got up, walked into the house, and went straight to her room. My oldest brother and my dad exchanged a look that made it clear they were both on the same page about something I didn't know. My dad finally broke the silence, saying, "Well, I guess that answers that question." My oldest brother, who's 11 years older than me and from my dad's first marriage, decided to fill me in on a long-standing family rumor. Apparently, this had been circulating long before I was born. When my late grandfather was overseas serving in the Korean War, it's alleged that my grandma, who was still just his girlfriend at the time, got pregnant with Uncle B by another man. The man in question was supposedly an ex-boyfriend from her high school days, whose name my dad vaguely remembered being brought up in arguments between his parents when he was a kid. When my grandfather returned from the war, they got married right away. I guess the timing of when Uncle B was born and when my grandfather came home aligned just enough to make it plausible that Uncle B was his son. But Uncle B doesn't look anything like my dad or the other two brothers. He's short and has very different features, while my dad and his younger brothers are all tall, broad-shouldered men who strongly resemble each other and their dad. I had never noticed it before, but now when I look at family photos, I can't help but see how different Uncle B looks in comparison. My ancestry discovery and my grandma's reaction to it basically confirmed the rumor as fact. We haven't spoken about it since that night. Only my dad, my brother, and I know for sure, and at this point, we see no reason to bring it to light. Story 2. My sister and father both did ancestry DNA testing and ended up discovering some new relatives because my dad was adopted. When I mentioned that I wanted to take the test as well, my mom got incredibly defensive and outright angry, demanding that I promise I wouldn't do it. For context, I don't look anything like my dad, so I went ahead and did the test behind everyone's back. Let's just say it's going to be an interesting Christmas this year when I get the results. Update: turns out he is my real dad. We're just very different people, both mentally and physically. At least now I know for sure, thanks to everyone who showed concern and followed along. Carry on, Internet. Story 3. My cousin, 26, tragically took his own life, and the circumstances surrounding it have haunted me ever since. My aunt, his mother, was a women's track coach at a major university. She had a tendency to push my cousin toward unattainable athletic goals, like convincing him he could join a football program in a specialized position as a walk-on. Even after his college football career at a lower-level school ended, she continued encouraging these delusions. My cousin was a sweet guy with a big personality, though he had his struggles. We grew up together as only children, so we were more like brothers. Despite living in different parts of the country, he in the Northeast and me in the South. I miss him terribly. My aunt, who was divorced from my uncle, always struck me as neurotic and odd. The last time I saw my cousin was at her vacation house, a $1 million property. Coaching evidently pays well. He was acting strangely, much more into drinking, drugs, and strip clubs than I'd ever known him to be. While we were pre-partying, my aunt joined in. She started dancing in a way that was unsettling, especially for a mother. I was weirded out, but tried to brush it off. Later that night, when we returned to the house and were getting ready to crash, she came into his room while I was there. What happened next made my stomach turn. She started cuddling with him and kissing him in a way that was far from maternal. Shocked and deeply uncomfortable, I left the room and slept on the couch. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it, trying to rationalize what I'd seen but failing. I said my goodbyes and got out of there as fast as I could. A couple of months later, my cousin took his own life. His death devastated everyone and caught us all by surprise. At the funeral, his mother leaned heavily into religion, turning to Jesus this and God that. I couldn't shake the memory of what I had witnessed. To this day, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who saw that side of their relationship. It still eats away at me, wondering if any of his friends or other family members ever suspected what I saw. Maybe I'm the only one who ever knew. Story 4. My grandma is without a doubt the alpha in her relationship with my grandfather. They had 3 sons, including my dad, who's the middle child. It's rare to get a chance to talk to my grandfather alone, since my grandma has always spoken for him or over him. However, there was this one time when she was in the hospital after surgery, and we had a rare moment to talk to Grandpa in the hallway. We asked him how they chose the names for their sons. He explained why they picked my dad's name, but then he let us in on a secret about naming their firstborn son, my Uncle Paul. When he first moved to California, he fell in love with a girl. Although their relationship didn't work out, a part of him never stopped loving her. Her last name was Paul, and he liked it so much that he decided to name his firstborn son after her, without ever telling my grandma. To this day, I don't think my grandma has any idea about the story behind Uncle Paul's name. It's one of the few moments we got to hear something deeply personal from Grandpa, and it still makes me smile to think about it. Story 5. I'm not going to be the one to break apart the family, but I often wonder what will happen to family gatherings once my grandma passes away. She's 94 and in surprisingly good health for her age, but she's also one of the most petty and mean-spirited people I've ever known. I can't help but wonder what kind of chaos will unfold when her health starts to decline. There's a barely hidden animosity between her and my mother, as well as my 2 aunts. One of my aunts has a child from a previous marriage who's been completely cut out of the will, and it's caused tension for over 2 decades. Every Christmas, we all receive cash as gifts, but my cousin has always gotten the short end of the stick. A few years ago, for instance, my sister, my bio cousin, and I each got $1,000. He got $1. He's also never invited on family vacations, though my aunt and uncle always are. As for my other aunt, she turns into an alcoholic when my grandma's around, and only when she's around. She's also the type to speak her mind without hesitation, which often makes things even messier. Because of all this, I only see the extended family maybe once a year. The cousins I used to be close with growing up feel distant now, but that's mostly my fault. I've always been terrible at communicating and reaching out to people. It's hard to tell what will happen to the family dynamic once Grandma's gone, but I can't imagine things staying the same. Story 6. I'm not sure if this would have torn the family apart, but I'm pretty certain my estranged older half-brother, who's about 20 years older than me, and his daughter tried to pull me into some kind of scam. Both of them had recently gotten out of state prison after serving short stints for drug-related charges. While they were locked up, my dad's mom passed away. My dad had already passed as well, and since he was an only child, my grandma's life insurance policies, there were at least 3, were paid out according to her wishes. The issue was that my dad's will had never been legally executed, so my brother had no way to access any of the inheritance. I think they were trying to sue one of the insurance companies, claiming that a policy hadn't been paid out. To do that, they needed my signature to execute my dad's will, which would give them the legal basis to pursue a lawsuit. What they didn't anticipate was that I worked for my local sheriff's office at the time. I listened to their ridiculous story, which was poorly thought out and full of holes, and decided to dig deeper. I called the law firm they claimed to have hired, and the story immediately fell apart. Then I contacted the insurance company directly. The representative I spoke with was incredibly helpful and kind. She gave me some well-timed hints and suggestions about what I should do next, and shared what little information she could legally provide about my grandmother's policies. Armed with that information, I called my brother back to hear his story one more time. It still didn't make any sense, so I laid out everything I had uncovered. Almost immediately, they dropped the entire matter and never brought it up again. Looking back, it's almost funny that they thought I wouldn't catch on. But I'm glad I was able to see through their scheme before they could cause any real trouble. Story 7. While my grandparents have always loved their children equally and have done everything they could to support them, they have no hesitation about making decisions based on who they think is actually responsible when it comes to estate and legal matters. My parent is the 3rd child in the family, yet they were chosen to be the executor of the will and estate, not the oldest sibling. One of their older siblings still lives in the childhood home with my grandparents. A situation that's a mix of helping them out and aggravating them on a daily basis. My grandparents have made it very clear that once they pass, the house will not go to anyone in the family. Part of the reason is that they want the money from the sale of the house to go to all their kids equally, but they also want to force the sibling who still lives at home to finally move on with their life. They even told my parent outright that they're expected to evict their brother when the time comes. If my uncle decides he's entitled to stay, it's going to be a chaotic and dramatic situation. No doubt about it. Story 8. The unspoken truth in my family is that nobody likes my brother-in-law. The issue is that revealing this would destroy our relationship with my sister, and by extension, with my niece and nephew, which none of us want. My brother-in-law has these unpredictable phases. Sometimes he's nice, but other times he's unbearable to be around. For example, at my dad's birthday party, he picked a fight with my cousin's husband over something minor. He was swearing and yelling in front of his small kids, creating a scene. He and his parents also made another cousin's life miserable when he rented an apartment from them. They would harass him daily over trivial things, like opening a window or showering too long. It got so bad that my cousin was desperate to move out. To top it off, my brother-in-law constantly makes rude, derogatory comments to my parents, me and my husband, all disguised as jokes. Despite all this, we let it slide. We know that if we confront him, it will turn my sister's life into a nightmare. She has no idea how we feel about him, and she's an amazing person. Family-oriented, loving, and kind. Unfortunately, she's also completely blind when it comes to him. We know she'd never leave him, even if he turned against us and pressured her to cut ties. So for the sake of keeping the peace and maintaining our relationship with her and her kids, we keep quiet and endure. It's frustrating, but we don't see another way. Story 9. My significant other, S.O., is the last surviving child of her parents. Her two brothers passed away about 15 years ago under tragic but different circumstances, one from a brutal battle with cancer and the other from a drug overdose. Both brothers left behind children. One had a daughter with his neurotic wife, and the other had a son with a girlfriend he never married. Despite the losses, her family has maintained contact with all the relatives. So's father passed away about 6 years ago, leaving her mother as the surviving parent. While both parents were still alive, they updated their wills and decided to leave everything to my S.O. However, there was a verbal agreement that she would share a specific portion with the grandchildren. Our 2 kids and her brother's 2 children, for a total of 4 grandchildren. The catch? The neurotic wife, who has a reputation for being a money grubber, was explicitly left out of the will. She gets absolutely nothing, and we know she's going to lose her mind when she finds out. The truth is, we don't care if this causes her to cut ties with the family. If anything, it might be a relief. Story 10. My girlfriend, the love of my life, caught COVID from me, and it took her life. We both got sick just before the vaccines became available. Her family doesn't know, though my family does. Her family has become my family too, and telling them would shatter them. She passed almost 3 years ago, and there's no point in revealing the truth now. It would destroy her parents. They often tell me they see their daughter when they look at me. She battled lymphoma for nearly 2 years, and during that time, I lived with her family while taking care of her. We've always been close, and they've been a source of support in our shared grief, but it eats away at me every day. Every moment I've spent with them grieving, I've carried the knowledge that I'm the reason for this pain. I'm not afraid of being rejected or told never to return. I'd accept that if it came to it, but I can't bear the thought of hurting them any more than I already have. Story 11. A few years ago, I asked my mom if she had ever cheated on anyone before. It came up during a conversation about a friend of mine who had cheated on his girlfriend. She admitted that she had, but when I asked who she cheated on, she refused to tell me. Since then, I've had this thought lingering in the back of my mind. My dad never really paid much attention to me when I was a kid, and my parents' relationship was always toxic and hostile. On top of that, my dad has fairly dark skin for a white man, whereas I'm much lighter than him, and our builds are completely different. Now go figure. Even if it turns out that my dad isn't my biological father, I wouldn't treat him any differently. He's done a lot for me, despite not always being present when I was younger. To be honest, I feel like my mom might have been the reason for much of his absence during my childhood. Regardless, I've decided it's not something I'm ever going to pursue. I'll let the question remain unanswered. Some things are better left alone. Story 12. My grandparents were smart enough to plan for my cousin's greed. Here's the backstory. My grandfather owned and operated a very successful business. However, my cousins didn't grow up with wealthy grandparents and weren't used to having money. I'm significantly younger than all my cousins, by about 15 years. There are 7 grandchildren in total. One was disowned, one inherited early, and the remaining 5 of us had all our assets placed in a partition trust. The trust is structured so that all the grandkids started with the same amount of assets. Any profits earned by your portion of the trust stay within your section. You can withdraw funds early, but only for specific purposes like medical bills, education, up to a PhD, or major life events, weddings, births, or funerals. If you pull out all your assets early, your section of the trust dissolves. Once you hit a specific release age, let's say 35, you can access the funds without restrictions. The trust itself dissolves 21 years after my release age. I'm just now approaching my magical release age, but all my cousins have long since pulled their assets out of the trust. My husband and I live as though the trust doesn't even exist, treating it as a safety net for true emergencies. Meanwhile, my cousins have been nagging me to pull out money for medical bills or other regular expenses. They have no idea how badly they've miscalculated by relying on grandma and grandpa's money instead of building their own security. It's worth mentioning that my cousins are all financially well off on their own, but they've used the trust to avoid dealing with life's uncomfortable moments. Little do they realize how much they've limited themselves by cashing out early. Story 13. My paternal grandfather had an affair with my grandmother's sister, and it resulted in a child. Since my great-aunt was married at the time, she passed the child off as her husband's. My dad and aunt grew up alongside this half-brother, believing he was just their cousin. When my grandmother found out about the affair, she immediately filed for divorce. However, before the divorce was finalized, my grandfather shoved her through a window and threatened to kill her if she told anyone the truth. The divorce eventually went through, but she kept the secret. Both of them remarried and life moved on. Years later, when my dad and aunt were adults, my grandmother finally told them the truth. As far as I know, they were the only ones she ever told, aside from my parents eventually sharing the story with us kids. My dad has always wanted to come clean about the situation, especially because he longs to have a real relationship with his half-brother. The plan was always to reveal the truth after my grandparents had passed away, but so far, it remains hidden. With DNA and ancestry programs being as accessible as they are, though, it feels like it's only a matter of time before the secret is exposed. In fact, one of my siblings recently took an ancestry test and was matched with one of the cousin brother's children as a first cousin. The proof is already there, waiting to come out. Story 14. I was the last person to speak to my younger brother before he passed away. For years I assumed, like my mom, that he had gotten some hero mixed in with a batch of bootleg pills. That's what we believed happened, and I didn't question it. But one day, everything came flooding back to me, and I remembered the conversation we had that night. He made me promise not to tell Mom, and I've kept that promise to this day. He admitted that he had tried snorting hero for the first time because his dealer had already sold the pain pills he was expecting to buy. He was acting like he usually did when he was on pain meds, so all I said was, "Man, I hope you don't do that anymore." I didn't realize that would be the last conversation I'd ever have with him. He overdosed that night. His heart had the same defect as our dad's, and it couldn't handle the strain. We found him the next afternoon. Mom completely broke down, and I had to stuff everything I was feeling deep inside to handle everything that came next. I took care of all the arrangements, even emceeing his funeral, which I turned into a celebration of his life. I paid for everything, supported my mother, and took care of my daughter through it all. For a while, I managed to keep it buried. But a couple of years later, the emotions started surfacing again. I'll never tell Mom the truth about that night. It would only cause her more pain and accomplish nothing. Besides, I made my brother a promise, and I intend to keep it. Story 15. This is an old family secret, and honestly, our family was never close-knit, but I think I understand part of why that was. My biological father was married to my mom's sister. On top of that, he fathered children with my mom's brother's wife. It all came out during my uncle's divorce from his wife. I didn't find out until after my mom passed away. My brother told me the truth and explained that she had sworn the older kids to secrecy. For the younger ones, she told them that she had adopted me. That part really hurt. She made my other brother believe, for his entire life, that I was adopted. I guess she didn't want anyone asking questions. Looking back, I think my aunt suspected something. She often made comments about how I had the cheeks and personality of my dad's side of the family. Apparently, everyone knew the truth except for me. When I finally told my nephew, who's a year older than me, he said, "That's what Granny told me, but she told me not to tell you." It's frustrating to think about how long the secret was kept and how many people were in on it. But at this point, I've come to accept it as part of our family's history, for better or worse. Story 16. I'm glad my aunt died. She was a homophobic bigot, and one of the last things she ever said to me was, "God is teaching you a lesson," while I was still recovering from chemotherapy. We had gotten into an argument about her homophobic remarks, and I'm not usually confrontational, so I started crying and reached out to hug her. Instead of comforting me, she shoved me. I was still weak from the cancer treatments, and I went flying. After that, I cut her off completely, blocked her on everything, and refused to speak to her again. About a year later, her son messaged me, saying she had been diagnosed with cancer and was dying. He said she really wanted to talk to me. I didn't call her. She died without ever hearing from me again. I guess God really did teach her a lesson. Story 17. My piece of shish uncle got his girlfriend pregnant back in the 70s and lied about it for almost 40 years. Growing up, I remember hearing whispers from my other aunts and uncles about this other kid. As a teenager, I overheard my dad and uncle dismissing the situation, calling the guy a scammer who was just after the family's money. But technology finally caught up with my uncle. The man who claimed to be his son reached out to me on Facebook, explained his story, and said he wasn't looking for money. He just wanted to know if our family had any genetic medical issues. I told him I'd answer any questions if he agreed to take a DNA test. He agreed, and sure enough, he was my cousin. To be honest, I didn't even need the test. The guy looks exactly like every other male on my dad's side of the family. Excited, I told my dad about the DNA results, expecting him to be happy that we'd found a long-lost family member. Instead, he told me not to tell anyone because it would be too much stress for my elderly grandmother and tear the family apart. My uncle found out about the DNA test and threatened me through my dad, saying I needed to drop it or else. You'd think a parent would stand up for their kid, but not my dad. Instead, he called me to pass along the threat and said the right thing to do was to drop the whole matter. I've since gone no contact with my parents, and this incident is a huge reason why. My uncle has since died during COVID, and frankly, I feel no sympathy for him. Story 18. My step-grandfather was incredibly creepy toward me when I was a kid. I avoided him like the plague, which kept things from escalating beyond inappropriate touching over clothes and creepy comments, but the experience still left scars. No 12-year-old should have to take responsibility for avoiding their own abuser. To this day, I watch him like a hawk whenever he's around my younger half-sister. I've also subtly asked my step-cousins if he's ever acted inappropriately toward them, but it seems I was the only one he singled out. Thankfully, he's retired now and lives in a retirement community, so I know he's not in contact with any other children. That's the only reason I've hesitated to tell anyone. I'm already an afterthought in that side of the family, and I don't want to risk being completely ousted and losing contact with my sister. I might blow everything up once my sister's an adult, or when he's dead. For now, I'm just focused on keeping her safe. Story 19. The only reason my grandparents ever got married was because my aunt was an unplanned pregnancy. Back then, in a time when having S outside of marriage brought immense shame, my grandparents were both in the Air Force. Their whirlwind romance and quick marriage were covered up by their military service, which made it easy to obscure the truth from their families. My grandmother's pregnancy was hidden just long enough to make it seem plausible that she didn't know she was pregnant until after they were married. My great-uncle, who was also in the military, was the only one who knew the full truth because he had access to details and evidence that the rest of the family didn't. To keep up the ruse, my grandparents lied about when they met and used their distance from family as an excuse for why nobody had met the other spouse during the typical engagement period. They got a courthouse marriage right after finding out about the pregnancy, then had a formal wedding later. They told family, he could have been deployed at any time, so we didn't waste any time when we made up our minds. Since that didn't happen, let's celebrate. While that explanation might sound valid for some, it was just a convenient cover for their situation. If my family were to find out that our entire existence started with an unplanned pregnancy and a shotgun wedding, it would devastate them. Personally, though, I've come to terms with it. It doesn't change anything for me. Story 20. This isn't so much a secret as it is something no one in my family openly acknowledges. We all pretend it isn't real. My grandfather on my mom's side is a terrible person. Even before he started to decline mentally, he was domineering and downright nasty. He's racist, homophobic, and fat shames everyone around him. He's notorious for picking favorites in the family and openly thinks that having daughters is ending the family lineage. And don't even get me started on his political beliefs, which verge on outright fascism. Sometimes I can't help but wish my other grandfather, my dad's father, was still alive instead of my mom's father. My dad's dad was the kindest, sweetest man you could ever meet. He was a second-generation Lebanese American who loved everyone in his community, no matter who they were. When he passed away, half the city came to his funeral. And I'm not exaggerating. I can't stand my mom's father and wish every day that I could trade him for the grandfather I actually miss. Story 21. My paternal grandfather isn't biologically related to my father. Both sets of my grandparents are deeply into genealogy and have documents and records spanning hundreds of years on each side of the family. After my mom and her parents did ancestry genetic testing, I decided to do it too. On my mom's side, everything lined up perfectly. On my dad's side, not so much. My dad's parents have a wild history, and after nearly 12 months of piecing things together, I finally figured it out. My dad's father isn't actually his biological dad. Now, I have a secret half-uncle, and so far we're the only two who know about this, as far as we can tell. We've exchanged photos, talked on the phone, and occasionally message each other just to say hi. It's hard keeping this secret, but after many conversations, we've decided it's best not to risk revealing it right now. We joke that once we're old and everyone involved has passed, we'll celebrate with a family reunion, or perhaps a family reunion. Story 22. When I was a toddler, my grandfather babysat me while my mom worked. On the same day, my grandma and my Aunt Lizzie went to visit a relative I'll call Uncle Bob. When my mom came to pick me up, she found my grandma in tears after just getting off the phone with Uncle Bob. My grandfather looked at my mom and simply said, "Don't ask. Just take me and go." Later, we learned why. Uncle Bob had accused my grandma of stealing something valuable, an item worth thousands of dollars. He even had to file an insurance claim on it, which only added to his frustration. My grandma vehemently denied taking it, and seeing how distraught she was, my mom believed her. That was until years later when my grandma got sick and was hospitalized. In a weak state, she told my mom that if she died, she needed to protect a stash of money hidden in her home. My mom, unfortunately, told my Aunt Patty about it, who immediately ransacked the house to find it. Not only did she find the stash of money, but she also found the missing item from Uncle Bob's house. When my grandma recovered and found out what Aunt Patty had done, she was furious. She moved the stash and the item to another hiding spot. To this day, even though my grandma now lives with us and has dementia, we haven't come across the item. She either hid it incredibly well among her belongings or gave it to one of my aunts, who denies having it. If Uncle Bob ever found out that my grandma had lied, it would cause absolute chaos in the family. Aunt Patty is the only other person who knows what the item looks like. But even if we found it now, there's no way to return it to Uncle Bob without reigniting a firestorm. Story 23. I come from a very conservative Southern Baptist or evangelical family, and I've always been the black sheep. About 6 years ago, I was at a bar with friends late at night when I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but since it was midnight, I thought it might be an emergency. When I picked up, a timid voice asked if I was my brother's sister. I confirmed and asked who was calling. The caller turned out to be a girl who had been living with my brother while he was in college. She was pregnant with his child. I had no idea who she was. I didn't even know my brother had a girlfriend. She told me that after she found out she was pregnant, my brother ghosted her. She had somehow gotten my number as a last-ditch effort to reach him. The next day, I texted my brother and asked him to come over so we could talk. He confirmed the girl's story and admitted that the only person he'd told was our dad. When I talked to my dad, he also confirmed it, but said he was keeping the secret from my mom because it would kill her if she ever found out. It's been 6 years since that night, and no one has spoken of it again. As far as I know, my mom still doesn't know. My brother met his now wife shortly after this happened, and I often wonder if she knows. The idea that I might have a niece or nephew I've never met is wild. Knowing how my family operates, I wouldn't be surprised if he never told his wife about it. They're pros at sweeping problems under the rug, and pretending they don't exist. Being the queer, non-religious, left-leaning black sheep of the family, I'm often the scapegoat for their frustrations. I'd be lying if I said I haven't fantasized about dropping this bombshell during a family gathering, just to watch the chaos unfold. It's tempting to imagine how everything would implode if this secret came out. Story 24. This isn't exactly my immediate family, but it feels connected. After my mom passed away 2 years ago, I decided to take an ancestry DNA test. When I got my results back, I discovered that an acquaintance of mine was a third cousin on my mom's side. I reached out to him via Facebook, and he agreed to help me piece together some information about my mom's biological family. I had a letter from the orphanage where my mom had been placed. It gave vague details about her birth parents, ages, physical descriptions, and family structure, like how many siblings they had and their professions. Using this information, my acquaintance was able to figure out that my mom's biological mother was actually his aunt. It turns out that my mom's birth mother is still alive and 90 years old. However, she had never told anyone about my mom except for her sister, her children, her other siblings. None of them knew. Now, my acquaintance has spoken to the sister who knew, and they're trying to decide whether or not to tell her. Since my mom has passed away, they wonder if it might be too much for her to handle, especially since she's kept it a secret for so long. Story 25. It's too late for a secret to tear my family apart. It already did. The secret is me. I was born to a mother with a drug problem, and as a biracial baby born out of wedlock, I became the focus of family drama. When the state stepped in, my maternal grandmother adopted me instantly, giving me an incredible upbringing and childhood. Unfortunately, this made me the target of resentment for the rest of the family. Growing up, I endured veiled criticisms from my siblings about being off color. One uncle apparently couldn't stand me from the time I was an infant. My adoptive mom tried to treat me equally to her biological children and left me a portion of her estate to ensure I'd be okay after she passed. But when she became bedridden with dementia, the resentment boiled over. My siblings, who managed her estate, ignored her wishes. They stole and sold everything she intended to leave me. Even my birth mother, who I thought would support me, turned out to be just as manipulative. She resented the fact that our mom had left the majority of the estate to me and only given her basic maintenance. At one point, my brother and sister showed up at my house, where I had lived for decades, with a moving crew. They emptied the house, changed the locks, and sold it. I was left with nothing. My birth mother pretended to help, but looking back, she sabotaged me. She gave me bad advice, encouraged me to fight back against the wrong people, and withheld crucial documents I needed to prove fraud until it was too late to act. I think she hoped my brother would abuse his power as trustee in her favor, as long as she wasn't the target. The family tore itself apart over my adoptive mom's estate. Many of them deeply resented that she considered me her child just as much as her biological children. They couldn't stand that she wanted me taken care of, because she knew our time together as parent and child would be shorter due to her age when she adopted me. To them, I was a mistake, and they've spent their lives trying to correct me. Story 26. My cousin believes that her dad is her biological father, and he believes she's his biological daughter too. They have a great relationship, and even after my aunt, her mom, passed away about 5 years ago, they've been doing well together. What they don't know, and what the rest of the family does, is that her mom constantly cheated on her dad with one of her exes. Most of the family was aware because this ex was always around, even at family gatherings. When my aunt got pregnant, she was ecstatic and told everyone it was her ex's baby. Initially, she broke up with my cousin's dad, and he didn't know she was pregnant. Unfortunately, her ex passed away when she was about 5 months along. Afterwards, she decided she didn't want to raise the baby alone and was planning to put her up for adoption. That's when my uncle, her brother, stepped in and told my cousin's dad about the pregnancy. Not knowing the baby wasn't his, he showed up at a family gathering, professed his love for my aunt, and begged her to take him back. She lied and told him that she thought he wouldn't want the baby, which is why she didn't tell him sooner. He never questioned anything, and they stayed together to raise my cousin. He absolutely adores her and treats her like a princess to this day. My aunt took the truth to her grave, and no one has ever spoken a word of it. But the rest of us all know. Story 27. The stories surrounding my great-grandmother's death are wildly inconsistent, and many of the great-grandkids don't even know anything about it. What I was told by my mom is that my great-grandmother fell, hit her head, and later unalived herself. My grandfather was the one who found her. Anytime someone brought up my great-grandfather, my grandpa would lose his temper. The family lore says that my great-grandfather abandoned the family, and after my great-grandmother died, my grandfather was raised by his aunt. The timeline of all of this is murky since the people who actually know the truth have either passed away or are too old to remember clearly. In my own research, I discovered that my great-grandfather remarried. I found their marriage certificate and later their divorce certificate. She was pregnant when they divorced, and the reason for the divorce was listed as extreme violence. Given that divorces were incredibly rare back then, this raises a lot of questions. My theory is that my great-grandmother's death was far more violent and sinister than anyone admits. I suspect that my great-grandfather physically harmed her, leading to her eventual death, which was later covered up. I want to get a copy of her death certificate, but it's locked behind a paywall with the county, so I'm waiting until I can afford it. Will this revelation tear the family apart? Probably not. Most of the great-aunts have passed, and few people are left to be upset. But it would definitely shake things up and possibly rewrite some of our family history. Story 28. I have a secret that could tear somebody else's family apart. My childhood best friend is not biologically related to her mother. Her parents used an egg donor. While her mother carried the pregnancy, the egg donor is completely anonymous. This isn't some huge earth-shattering revelation, but the problem is that my friend doesn't know. Her mother decided never to tell her, and now as an adult, she's still unaware that she was donor conceived. The only reason I know this is because my friend's mom confided in my mom when we were kids. When I was around 16, I casually commented on how much shorter my friend is compared to her parents, and my mom accidentally let the secret slip. If her parents had been honest with her when she was young, it likely wouldn't have been such a big deal. But now if she ever finds out, especially from someone other than her mom, it's going to feel like a massive betrayal. Her dad has already passed away, so the responsibility of telling her falls solely on her mother. I feel like I have no right to tell her this, and I would never intentionally let it slip. But if I ever did, I know it would be catastrophic, not just for her relationship with her mom, but also between her mom and mine. Story 29. My mother stole the inheritance that was meant for me, and possibly my sister too. I was the first grandchild on both sides of my family, and both of my maternal grandparents were financially well off, even after being divorced for years. They both passed away when I was a young adult. I had planned to attend the readings of their wills, but my mom told me I didn't need to. She assured me that she'd handle everything and let me know if anything came up. Later, she told me that neither grandparent had left anything for me. That was disappointing because I'd been under the impression, based on things my grandmother had said, that she planned to leave me some money. At the time, I figured the strained relationship between my mom and her parents had extended to me as well, so I let it go and moved on. Years later, I ran into my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, and the topic of why I never finished college came up. Lack of money was one of the reasons. She asked why my mom hadn't helped me, and I explained that my mom had always said there wasn't any money. My great aunt just stared at me, then asked what happened to the money my grandmother left me. When I told her there wasn't any, she kept staring. That's when I learned that my grandparents had left money for me, and possibly for my sister, though I don't know for sure since we're not close. My great aunt later passed away, and my uncle, her executor, confirmed that she had told him about the inheritance. At this point, I could probably pull the wills and find the truth for myself, but I don't think I want to. It would just give me more reasons to resent my mom, and I already suspect that whatever money she took is long gone. She spends like water. I'll never know for sure, but I'm almost certain my mother stole what was meant to help me build my future. Story 30. I was the secret that tore a family apart. My mother got pregnant with me by a man she met at work. When she told him, he denied I could be his and disappeared. He was about 20 plus years older than her. Growing up mixed in an all-white family, I always felt different. By the time I was 9, I wanted to find my father. We started talking on the phone occasionally, but he would disappear for long stretches, only to come back claiming he had been on secret missions for the U.S. military. I met him in person a couple of times, once at my house and once when I visited him. He was incredibly secretive and avoided answering questions about his family. The one thing he did tell me was about his son, who's 20 years older than me, and his grandchildren, my niece and nephew. Strangely enough, my niece and I were born on the exact same day and year, which always felt surreal. During one visit, he let me talk to my brother on the phone, which made me think my brother knew about me. Fast forward to now. I'm 25, and I recently reached out to my brother, who is now 45, via Facebook because I needed some health history information. A few days later, he asked if we could talk on the phone. During that call, he told me he had no idea I existed. His mom and dad had been together since before he was born, so finding out I was his half-sister was a complete shock to him. It turns out I was an affair baby, and that's why my father was so strange and secretive. My brother had to break the news to his mom that his dad had fathered another child 25 years ago. My father stopped communicating with me entirely when I turned 18, probably so my mom couldn't take him to court for child support. It's a lot to process, but at least I finally know the full truth. Story 31. My mom cheated on my stepdad, and I'm the only one who knows. My stepdad has been the only decent father figure in my life, and the only parent I would never consider going no contact with. I genuinely love him. So my heart broke when I discovered the truth. When my mom was seriously ill and we were told to start planning her funeral, I went on her phone to find photos for the service. That's when I accidentally stumbled upon a S-tape of her with someone who definitely wasn't my stepdad. She managed to recover and came back home, completely unaware that I know about her affair. It's been weighing on me ever since, especially seeing how kind and caring my stepdad has been to her since she got home. I also know that before my mom's illness, my stepdad had been considering either killing himself or faking his death to disappear. He casually told me this one night and asked me not to tell anyone. He'd been deeply depressed, which makes sense because my mom didn't treat him well. Her near-death experience seems to have changed something for him. He realized he still loves her despite everything. On the positive side, their relationship has genuinely improved a lot since then. It's a small silver lining in an otherwise heartbreaking situation. Story 32. This involves my extended family. Growing up in Mexico, I was molested by my older cousin. 18 years later, I returned and decided to tell my grandparents about what happened. I gathered my uncle, aunt, and cousins and sat them down to confront them with the truth. I thought sharing my story would bring some relief, but their reactions shocked me. They told me, "We're family. We should leave it behind and move on." I was furious and asked them if they'd feel the same way if this had happened to their grandson. They admitted they wouldn't. Then, as if to justify their indifference, they said, "The same thing happened to Jenny. She got raped by her boyfriend, and we had them married because that's what's right to do after he took her virginity." That's when I realized just how deeply broken and toxic this family was. Thankfully, I had recorded the entire conversation, including my cousin admitting to what he did. For a while, I thought about paying locals to play the recording on repeat to expose them, but ultimately, I decided to let it go and move on. However, if my cousin ever tries to deny it or say anything, I have that recording, and I know it would destroy their family's reputation in the village. Story 33. My dad has multiple online girlfriends that he cheats on my mom with. He spends a lot of money on platforms like Second Life and other virtual spaces. I first figured it out when I found a story on a USB stick he had written about meeting someone during a work trip. I'm not sure if that particular story was fictional, but it lined up too well with the other pieces I put together. I think my family knows about it now. My mom accidentally posted something on Facebook that was meant for an anonymous group. In the post, she revealed that my dad manipulated her into being okay with his behavior when she found out. She also admitted she feels too trapped to leave him. I've never confronted my dad about how I feel, though I came close during a fight. He demanded I tell him why I don't respect him. I almost let it all out, but held back because I knew it would set off a chain reaction of no return. The fight itself was about him trying to hit my small dog against a wall in front of me, and then immediately gaslighting me by claiming he was just trying to push her away. That's a whole other story in itself. The truth is, I think my dad has the emotional intelligence of a petulant child. I'll never respect him for how he treats my mom or for his behavior. He sees me as an extension of himself, not as an individual. He's incredibly harsh in his expectations of who he wants me to be without ever trying to understand who I actually am. I use him as a model of what not to be, to make sure my wife and daughter never go through the kind of torment he's put us through. I don't think this secret would tear the whole family apart, but it might permanently sever my relationship with him. At the moment, he just thinks I'm a loser who is hard to reach because I keep my distance and only make myself available for emergencies. If he knew the truth, it would shift from, "My son is unreliable," to my son actively hates who I am as a person. And honestly, he wouldn't be wrong. Story 34. I come from a family with a dark spiritual history. Two of my aunts are spiritually gifted, though one of them masks it under the guise of Christianity. Together, they conjured spell work to take the life of their own father because he was physically and mentally abusive to my grandmother and her 7 children. They caused him to die in a horrific car accident involving a semi-truck. While their actions were driven by a sense of justice, it also awakened a hunger for power in them. Since then, they've used their spiritual gifts to manifest dream lives, achieving career success, marriage, and financial stability. I don't like using the term manifest as it literally means to feast on the energy of man. If you know, you know. My other aunt, who wasn't like them, was the quiet one. She moved in with my grandmother to help care for her and pay the bills. Tragically, she mysteriously passed away around Thanksgiving in 2019. The coroner listed her cause of death as inconclusive. My grandmother has always felt something was off about it, and she's absolutely right. Things took a more sinister turn recently. One of the spiritually gifted aunts told my grandmother and me last year that she was planning to move to my city to retire in her dream home. Not long after, her eldest daughter, my cousin, moved to the same city, and then a natural disaster destroyed my apartment on Christmas Day, leaving me temporarily homeless. My aunt was quick to offer her help, much like she had during my childhood. I ended up moving to my cousin's complex to be closer to family, but I soon realized it wasn't a coincidence. After I moved, my life seemed to spiral. I totaled my car in a semi-truck accident but walked away without a scratch. I also ended up in the hospital with undiagnosed pain, later revealed to be a kidney stone. These events felt like orchestrated attempts to break me down. I started piecing things together. Every time this side of the family faced challenges, they moved closer to me, and my life would inexplicably fall apart while theirs improved. It became clear they were siphoning my energy to fuel their own lives. I decided to cut ties. When my cousin's parents visited me before I moved out, her mom, the main aunt, and I went for a walk and encountered a snake. Later, my cousin asked me what I thought it meant, pretending to take an interest in my spirituality. That's when I knew it was time to sever all connections. The last straw was when my cousin's father bribed my leasing office to delay my move-out refund and find out where I was moving next. They planned to send more spell work to disrupt my life further. For years, these aunts have painted me as the black sheep, triangulating my grandmother against me while secretly envying the spiritual gifts I was born with. They knew I was destined to break generational curses and heal the bloodline, but they spent my entire life trying to swap their destinies with mine and slow my progress. Sometimes I want to tell my 83-year-old grandmother everything, but without concrete evidence, it's hard. Spiritual abuse is real, and it happens in families far more often than people feel safe admitting. I hope that someday those who've endured these experiences will find justice for the harm caused by forces beyond the tangible. Story 35. This isn't exactly a secret, but it's something nobody in my family talks about openly. I come from a Muslim family. While we're not the strictest, there are certain values we hold in high regard, such as avoiding smoking and alcohol. One of my cousins has a severe drinking problem. Everyone in the family knows about it, most of my cousins and even a few uncles, but it's never addressed. He's been an alcoholic for years, and there are rumors that he borrows a lot of money from his wife to feed his addiction. Growing up, he would often bully me, using emotional blackmail to make me afraid. On top of that, he has physically attacked me a couple of times. Once I stood up for myself, and he lashed out. When I tried to discuss it with my mother, she refused to address the issue and even reached for excuses to blame me instead. She doesn't want me to confront him, but then calls me weak for not standing up for myself. This situation has caused a lot of strain within the family. His father has completely shunned him, and they don't communicate at all, even though they still live under the same roof. Unfortunately, this has also led his father to neglect his daughter-in-law, who is caught in the middle. She doesn't want to have children with him, yet she hasn't left him either. It's a toxic situation all around, and the silence about it only makes it worse. Everyone seems content to pretend it's not happening, even as the consequences affect everyone involved. Story 36. My family likes to believe it's solid, but it's actually pretty much shattered at this point. I've always been seen as the golden child, or the standard to live up to by my parents. That image dimmed a bit after 2016, when they started viewing me as an idiot liberal. but they still hold on to some of that perception. For the past decade, I've been working on my mental health, and part of that process has been coming to terms with my true identity. After years of suppressing it and staying deep in the closet, I've realized that I'm bishul, at the least gender fluid, but most likely a trans woman. I'm almost 40, and I'm planning to come out within the next 2 years. I fully expect this to permanently damage my relationships with my parents and one of my brothers, who are so entrenched in MAGA ideology that I doubt they'll ever speak to me again. This will be especially hard because I was a father figure to that brother before our parents decided to step up and raise their kids together when he was 8. My other brothers might be more understanding, but even though they lean left politically, they still have issues with trans people. However, they are slowly improving. One of my nephews might transition to non-binary in the next few years, which has softened their perspectives. The hardest part of all of this is my wife. We've been together for 20 years and she's been my rock through so much. But she's not attracted to women and comes from an even more conservative background than I do. The thought of losing her terrifies me. It's become a sort of unspoken topic in our house, and I've been working through it in therapy, but the uncertainty weighs on me daily. On a lighter note, here's some family tea. My great-grandmother left my great-grandfather in the 1950s, taking my grandmother and great-aunt with her to become a literal prostitute. After 2 years, she returned with a new baby, another great-aunt, then disappeared for 6 more years before giving that baby to the man she believed to be the real father. She eventually reunited with my great-grandfather, and they stayed together until her death in the 1990s. The family avoids DNA testing because they're terrified of finding out that they might not be related to my great-grandfather. He was the rock of the family, and his death devastated everyone. No one wants to risk discovering they're not biologically connected to him. Story 37. My father-in-law, ERIP Big Steve, and I discovered that my brother-in-law had secretly married a foreign girl to keep her in the country. Instead of directly confronting him, we hatched a plan to force him to admit it in front of the family. We suspected the marriage months before we found proof. After some digging through public records and social media posts, we confirmed the wedding. From there, we carefully orchestrated a situation where he'd have no choice but to confess. Since he was living at home, my father-in-law began subtly messing with him, asking questions and setting traps to corner him. The big reveal happened during a birthday celebration when my father-in-law pressed him about why he couldn't stay on medical insurance for another year as a dependent since he was still in college. The kicker? My brother-in-law had been claiming head of household on his taxes for benefits reasons, and the contradictions forced him to admit the truth. We never told the rest of the family about our months of investigating or the small harassment campaign leading up to that moment. My sister-in-law's birthday was completely ruined by the confession, but we felt it was worth it to get the truth out in the open. Story 38. This isn't really a secret anymore, but none of my extended family knows about it, so I guess it still counts. It also already tore my family apart. When I was around 10 or 11, I started to piece together that my mom was definitely cheating on my dad, which is why they divorced when I was about 1.5. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't connect the dots sooner. My sister was born when I was almost 4, and it's pretty clear that someone doesn't just recover from a divorce that quickly to start a new family. I found actual evidence when I was on my mom's phone one day. A guy who wasn't her at-the-time boyfriend messaged her on Facebook, and out of curiosity, I clicked on the messages. What I found nearly tore me apart. It confirmed everything. At the time, I didn't fully understand what I was looking at, but it made sense when I thought about how my dad used to say that the only reason people get divorced is if one or both partners cheat. That should have been the obvious clue all along. Most of my family doesn't know about this, and I've since moved on, but part of me wonders if my mom is still cheating. I don't have any proof, but it's something I can't completely shake. Story 39. My mom has a DUI that she managed to keep completely secret until I stumbled upon it because of my job. When I was 16, I came home from school one day and saw her wearing a Goodwill shirt. I asked her why she was working there, but she dodged the question and begged me not to say anything. At the time, I assumed we were going through financial hard times, so I didn't press further. I didn't want to make my dad feel ashamed. My mom has always had an on and off issue with alcohol. She's thankfully off now, but I didn't think much of it back then. Recently, I got a government job that gave me access to our state's public criminal records database. Out of curiosity, I started looking up family members for fun, mainly so I could tease them about things like speeding tickets. But to my surprise, I found my mom's DUI record and all the details about it. I wasn't sure what to do with the information, but I eventually decided to confront her privately. Her reaction was pure deer in the headlights. She looked terrified. I told her I wasn't going to tell anyone because I had no reason to, but the look on her face said everything. If my dad were to find out, it would completely tear her apart. He's already hard on her, and this would give him even more fuel to be cruel. So I told her she should work on getting it expunged from her record, and I'll help her do that in private this year. On a side note, if my in-laws knew what I really thought of them, I'd be banished for sure. Trust me, my unkind words are completely justified, but for now I'm keeping my mouth shut. Story 40. I feel the same way about my mother as everyone else in the family does. I don't want to see or talk to her, but unlike the rest of the family, I haven't gone no contact. The only reason I haven't is because I'm afraid that if I cut her off, she'll actually commit suicide. And if that happens, my estranged sister and I will be forced to figure out who's going to take care of our dad. A man who insists he can live on his own but can barely walk at 50 due to arthritis, heart problems. My dad refuses to put my mom in the mental institution where she belongs because he's afraid it would break her completely. So he just lets her spiral out of control, and we're all left dealing with the fallout. She's even confided in me that she worries she's destroyed her relationships with everyone in the family, but she frames it like she's a victim of family drama. What I really want to tell her is that it's true. She did destroy every relationship. And no, she's not a victim. I don't love her. I don't want to talk to her. I only keep her in my life because of my dad. He's a stubborn asshole I wouldn't want to be around either, but I know I can't afford to put him in a nursing home once my mom is gone. My mom is a toxic woman who deserves to be alone and unloved. My dad should have divorced her years ago, back when I was a teenager and he was having an emotional affair. Instead, he stayed, and she proceeded to destroy her relationships with everyone. Her brother, my grandmother, my dad's dad, my aunt, especially my aunt, my sister and me. She pitted my sister and me against each other throughout our entire childhood, which is one of the reasons we haven't spoken in 8 years. To be fair, I know I played a part in our falling out, but my mother was the root cause of it all. She's emotionally abusive, physically neglectful, and selfish. Narcissistic asshole doesn't even begin to describe her. And yet, if I ever told her the truth and she ended up taking her own life, I know I'd be seen as the villain. I'd become the asshole no one in the family would want to see again. Story 41. I'm pretty sure my dad is having some kind of long-distance relationship with another woman, or at least something along those lines. I don't have any concrete proof, but this year has been strange. He's been glued to his phone a lot more than usual, and he gets defensive whenever someone comments on it. There are patterns of behavior now that were never there before. I'm on the fence about how I feel about him. Part of me doesn't like him much anymore. He was never very attentive as a dad, and he didn't teach me how to grow from a kid into a man. Now I'm dealing with a bunch of stuff I should have learned from him. But the other part of me tries to give him some grace. He came to the U.S. as an immigrant and probably didn't get much guidance from his own dad. So maybe he's doing the best he can with what he knows. That said, I've had enough of this household. I'm still living with my parents, but I'm planning to get out by the new year. I've reached my limit. I haven't said anything to my mom about what I suspect because even though she's the better parent, she's been spiraling a bit lately. I'm sure it's because of him. He's a lazy POS who spends every day doing the same thing, watching TV and not growing as a person. Their relationship seems like it's heading toward chaos. My mom has been through so much emotionally, and she's also dealing with some health issues. I don't want to add this to her plate. From a male perspective, I can almost understand my dad's behavior. Maybe he's looking for attention somewhere else. I'm not justifying it, but I'm not going to bring it up either. Both of them are heading toward turmoil, and I see it plain as day. I've decided to just wish them well, quietly pack up my things and leave. This is my goodbye. I just needed to get this off my chest. So goodbye.